Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and today I am here to give you some sci-fi book recommendations. I'm so excited to be doing this video because sci-fi is one of my favorite genres. I love science fiction books, but sometimes I have a hard time finding book recommendations for my particular tastes. That's because if you don't know my taste, if you're not familiar with my videos, I like really realistic books, realistic sci-fi. I don't like science fiction that toes the line with fantasy where there's like magic or unexplained science. I prefer realistic science that is technology based, that is as realistic as possible while obviously still being fiction most of the time. I also like high action, interesting plot sci-fis that also have good characters. That's a must-have for me for a sci-fi to become a favorite. It doesn't just need to be a good plot, it also has to have good characters. So if that sounds in line with what you enjoy in sci-fi books and want to get some recommendations, definitely stick around for this video. I'm excited to share some popular as well as some lesser known, unpopular sci-fi books that I would recommend whether you are a sci-fi lover or a sci-fi beginner. I will let you know all of the details for what you should try out. So I thought a good way to structure this video would be to talk about some more popular sci-fi books, and if you've liked those in the past, where you can go after that to get sci-fi books with similar vibes. So first I'm going to start by talking about Blake Crouch. He has two very popular sci-fi books called Dark Matter and Recursion that I also absolutely loved. Both of these books have to do with like alternate reality type stories. Dark Matter specifically has to do with this main character who is walking home one day, he gets pulled into an alley and knocked out, and then when he wakes up, he's in a different life where he's still himself, but like his wife is not his wife, he no longer has a son, and he's in basically an alternate universe, and it's all about him figuring out what's going on and trying to get back to his normal life. And then Recursion is similar but different. It's about this world where people are starting to get false memories, and they feel so realistic that people are killing themselves because these memories are driving them mad. They're telling them that they've lived lives that they never lived. So it kind of has similar themes because people are dealing with like alternate histories, alternate memories, and it just goes from there. I absolutely loved both of these books, as do many people. If you haven't checked out these ones, it's a great place to start with sci-fi. They might sound a little bit out there in concept, but they're very easily readable and easily understandable. My favorite out of the two is Recursion. I would say that's a little bit of an unpopular opinion. Most people really love Dark Matter the most, but I found the characters in Recursion to be a lot more developed, and I liked the personal relationships between the characters. But regardless, they were both 5 stars, and if you have read those and want more books like them, here are some recommendations. The first is a book called Do You Realize by Kevin A. Kuhn. This is a book about a guy who is just living his life. He's like middle-aged or something. He's kind of in a rut with his life. He's just doing the same thing day after day, and he gets approached one day to test out this new smartwatch app that basically lets him travel back in time like 10 times or something to relive certain moments or days in his life. I loved this one because it has kind of the time travel, alternate reality premise, and it makes for very good conversation in like, what would you do if you were presented with this opportunity? What moments would you go back to in your life? And how would your life change as a result if you got to change some of those moments in the past? This is definitely an underhyped book. It has very few reviews on Goodreads, and if the premise sounds interesting to you at all, I really enjoyed it and would recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. The next similar book I want to recommend is Golden State by Ben H. Winters. This is a little bit more of a dystopian type book because this is set in a society where it is illegal to lie, and we are following, I think, a policeman who is tasked with enforcing this and arresting people for lying, but it goes in kind of a similar route as Recursion. I would definitely say that this book and Recursion have a lot of similarities. I actually get them confused a lot of times in my mind when I'm remembering certain scenes or characters. I'm like, wait, which book was that from? So definitely a direct recommendation. If you enjoyed Recursion, I would recommend Golden State. I think I gave it 4 stars, so it wasn't quite as like all-time favorite as Recursion was, but definitely gave me similar vibes and was an enjoyable read for sure. The next recommendation I have is Infinite by Brian Freeman. This one I would directly recommend as a similar book to Dark Matter. This book is about a main character who I think has a near-death experience, and that's what kind of propels him into this alternate reality, and he finds himself kind of seeing different ways that his life could have played out had he made different decisions, and he again is kind of trying to get back to his normal reality. This one I also gave 4 stars. I think this one for me became a situation where I've read this story and this trope so many times that it's just a little bit less shocking to me the more times I read it. So therefore it's a little bit less enjoyable. So I still objectively gave it 4 stars. Like, I really enjoyed it. But I think if you haven't read that trope a million times, you would really like this book as kind of the first time you've read it. And so that is who I would recommend it for. And then I have 2 young adult recommendations in this vein. The first is Game Changer by Neal Shusterman. This is about a high school student who finds himself going going to many different alternate realities. And this book tackles a lot of like larger issues, especially for being a young adult book. He's able to see a world in where in the past segregation was not outlawed. And so he's seeing a future world where Black people and white people are still segregated. And that's just one example of the different, you know, realities that he experiences, but it definitely goes there. And I appreciated that. Some people have given reviews that they don't think it goes deep enough into those issues to like fully explore them because he's doing multiple realities. It's not like a full book discussing each alternate history, but I actually really liked that it kind of touched on multiple different scenarios where if the past had gone differently, how that would affect our future today. Obviously, some for the better and some for the worse. And I appreciated that a YA book, even if it couldn't fully discuss all of these scenarios, it at least makes you start thinking about them, which I think is always a good thing. I think all of us could add a little bit of perspective into our lives and just take a second to think about what has brought you to where you are, both in actual like history of mankind as well as in your own life. So that's why I would recommend that book. And then the other young adult book to recommend in this category is Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessl. This is a little bit different because this is a Groundhog's Day type book where we're following a group of teenagers who get themselves into a situation where they have to repeat the same day over and over until they make a really difficult decision. So it's a little bit different because it's not like traveling to alternate realities or universes, it's just staying within the same day over and over, but it brings up similar conversations again about how your decisions impact your life. And even throughout a single day, the different decisions you make throughout that day can have drastically different results in how your life ends up. And I love that conversation. I thought this one was super fun. It's a little bit of a mystery in there too. So if you're like a thriller lover, I think this is a nice tie-in between sci-fi and thrillers. So highly recommend Neverworld Wake. Okay, the next kind of subgenre I want to get into is space books. This is a subgenre I really like. I recently explored even more space books in a recent vlog where I read 6 space books, and they all kind of unknowingly to me had different subgenres, so I got to find out what types of space books even I enjoy. So if you would like to learn more about like what's an example of a space book with a medical subgenre, or one with more of a political focus, or one that is a space book with a murder mystery, I read all of those types of books, and so I will link that video below. I'm not going to repeat any of those books that I just recently read in this video because it was so recent, but did want to plug it in case you haven't watched that video of mine. But I still have other space book recommendations. The first is the most popular, Andy Weir. He is the king of space books. He's written 3 full-length novels at this point. They are The Martian, Artemis, and Project Hail Mary. I have given all 3 of them 5 stars. So I am a huge Andy Weir fan, and if you are interested in space books and haven't checked out Andy Weir, I highly recommend it. The Martian is probably his most popular at this point. It has been turned into a movie, and it's about this man who is an astronaut and he gets stuck on Mars. The rest of his crew abandons him because they think he died, but he didn't die. So now he is alone on the planet and having to survive until his crew can come back and get him. Artemis is the second book, and it's definitely the most controversial of his books. If somebody doesn't like an Andy Weir book, it's usually Artemis. It's about this main character who lives on a colony in the moon, and it's like its own town and everything, like it's been fully colonized. It doesn't have the best overall rating, but I personally still enjoyed it. I think it has classic Andy Weir humor, and it's the shortest out of all of his books, so it's a quick read. And then his most recent release is Project Hail Mary. This has been very popular in the last few years, but we are following this astronaut who wakes up on a spacecraft completely alone and with no memory of who he is or why he got there. And so it's all about him figuring out why is he on this mission, what is his mission, and just carrying that out. So Andy Weir is definitely popular, and in my opinion, for good reason. I will pick up every book he ever writes in the future. And if you have already read those books and enjoyed them, the one book that I would recommend you try out next is Do You Dream of Terra 2 by Temi O. This is a book about a group of teenagers. Don't let that scare you because they are teenagers alone on a spacecraft on a mission to go to a new planet. They have made the decision to go and colonize this new planet and never come back, so they are leaving all of their families and everyone behind. And because the journey is so long, they had to choose teenagers to do it because adults wouldn't make it to the planet with enough time to still colonize it. So it's these teenagers basically having to act as adults and make decisions as adults, and it's all about them on that journey to the planet, which is called Terra 2. I loved this book. I feel like I never hear anyone talk about it, but I loved the character dynamics and again how they basically basically did have to form their own government or way of controlling themselves on this super long mission without any adults or anyone telling them how to do things. They get to decide for themselves. I think this book was a good mix of like contemplative as well as high action, which again is what I look for in sci-fi books, so highly recommend as a space book recommendation. And then the last kind of category that I want to recommend books in is like the video game category. So the most popular book that everyone knows and loves is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Again, I also really love this book. I gave it 5 stars. It's about this world in which a virtual reality video game has basically taken over the world, and most people prefer to spend their time in this game instead of in real life. So the world physically is kind of crumbling because nobody's taking care of it or anything. Everyone's just in this utopian video game, and then this quest is revealed after the creator of that video game dies. It's revealed that he had left like Easter eggs and this quest for people to go on. If they make it all the way to the end, they get riches and treasures and things like that. So we're following our main character play that video game and go on that quest. It's so much fun. I love books about games, especially video games where they can make it really immersive and like its own little world. I loved the challenge aspect of Ready Player One, where it was like checkpoint after checkpoint, puzzle after puzzle. So if you haven't read it and think you might be interested, of course I would recommend Ready Player One, but if you have already read that and want some similar recommendations, I have a couple for you. The first is going to be Rabbits by Terry Miles. This is a book I recently read and really enjoyed. This is a little bit different because it's not a video game that our characters are involved in. It is a real life game where basically in these people's real lives they're seeing clues and discrepancies and things they have to follow in order to get to the end of whatever they're searching for. This one is a little bit weird. It's very dark, but it's really fun in that it does the same thing of like puzzle after puzzle, clue after clue, and it's just a wild ride to the end. And then the other recommendation I have is Slay by Brittany Morris. This is a video game book. It's about this main character who is a Black teenager, and she has created her own online virtual reality video game for the Black community, and it has a lot to do with like Black culture, and those make up the elements of the game. I loved this book so much. It was my favorite book of 2020, it must have been. It has an awesome main character. She is so badass. And she basically is dealing with maintaining this massive online video game that has become kind of a phenomenon within the Black community, and then dealing with things and people that are threatening that community for her. And then it also has the really fun in-game elements of like competitions, quests, things like that. So I know that that's a book that I recommended a lot on this channel, but it is so worth it, and I think more people should read it. So that is all for my sci-fi recommendations at this time. I am absolutely going to be continuing to pick up sci-fi books, continuing to hone my own personal tastes, as well as continuing to build my arsenal of sci-fi recommendations that I can give. I'm far from an expert, so please let me know if you have any sci-fi book recommendations. I would love to hear them and try them out, and I would also love to know what type of sci-fi books do you like? I know I only went into like 3 main categories of sci-fi books in here, or subgenres, and there are so many others out there. So please let me know what are your favorites, and I would love to either try them out for myself or give some recommendations if I've already read them. But other than that, I don't think I have anything, so I will let you go. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.